afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another Propagandacast Lehr with me, your host, Imperial Dane. My apologies for being, having a bit of a period where there was nothing, but essentially a lot of patches rather created a bit of a mess for me, since, well, it basically wore out my regular episode buffer, which meant I had to focus on that fast. So there's a bit of trouble there, plus, of course, all my replays constantly getting wiped. There's very little sort of chance of finding something to use for in particular, since I rather had intended to have a look here at the M15 AA Halftrack. A bit of a unit that definitely deserves a video of its own. It's a rather, well, early sort of vehicle, tier 2 for the Americans. It's also a rather powerful one. In fact, it's probably one of the most powerful tier 2 vehicles in the game. In that regard, it's also a very unique vehicle in several regards as well. We can in fact start out with one of them, and that's in fact it actually doesn't shoot out of the front, or can shoot from the front. Again, there's a huge basically zone of can't bloody well shoot there. That's essentially a large weak spot there for it. Already there, though, of course, a lot of players tend to basically reverse move it around, which is sensible. But it's also important to know it actually is a bit costly. 350 manpower and 60 fuel, and certainly for a vehicle, that's quite expensive. The only thing that sort of really, costs more than that, more or less, is the Puma. And even the Puma can be somewhat threatened by this, but this is a rather heavy-handed vehicle here, capable of doing a lot of things. For example, and that is also vital to keep in mind, it can actually shoot while moving. It shoots machine guns, not the main cannon though. That's a bit important to note. It can actually suppress certain use rolls. Don't forget again, standing still, shooting, it can actually do a lot of damage. As you might have noticed there, that crew, even with a gun shoot, took quite a bit of damage here from the 15 half-track. So again, a rather important little detail there to keep in mind. It can also suppress in both modes. And again, note here, reversing around, there's a threat. You reverse move towards it. Now, of course, in this case, note again, suppressed while moving. And the end of the Pantrack does force a bit back. Though in theory, in most situations, you can sort of catch in the right situation. You can even force, say, a unit like that to pull away. Though any heavy, and say your Panzer squad with 2 Pantracks, it might not work quite as well. Also note it does have a range of 40. Also important to keep in mind, which is about the same as most tanks, though again, for example, not as a Puma. Though previously it actually had a range much closer to that, 45. So again, a very powerful sort of vehicle, can lay down a torrent of fire. Again, not from the front. Again, the front is a very big weak spot, and again, most players will do something to the gate. Though again, if you can sort of sneak a light vehicle in front of it, you will generally have the advantage, because again, that is a weak spot. Otherwise, the sort of major weakness of the M15, besides say an Commander S Puma, is basically anti-tank guns. Since again, they can usually engage it from a much safer range, thus dealing with it that way. And again, it can't really take a lot of hits, so again, I mean, it's a half-track. That's also something vital to keep in mind, and certainly does need some weaknesses. I have heard people apparently saying, it's not supposed to have any. Something at least shouldn't reach out to tank them, because it's always a bit funny. But anyways, strong, again, can do a lot of damage, and well used, it can really, both push and assault very well, because again, you'll basically fire down most infantry units and do a lot of damage to them, but at the same time, it can also be a good part of the defense, though. When you do then have it part of a defense, you usually want to sort of cover it up so opponent can't directly move an anti-tank and sort of shoot at it. You want somehow, so it basically is a bit of an enfilade, or defilade, I can't remember what's on there, sort of a direct anti-tank position, but at the same time you can cover the vital spots. If you can do that, can generally do pretty well. But again, reverse move. Reverse move is more your friend here with the M15 than any other unit in the game, because again, no other any other unit can't shoot out the front. Also important to know, it's an absolutely no setup time. So again, no setup times, unlike say the other German flag half-track, which has a setup time, and this has none. It's got, well, more or less, it actually doesn't really get any sort of combat bonus until veterancy 3. They'll still gain something. It also has a pretty unique veterancy bonus or ability, which basically means sets it into sort of aircraft, anti-aircraft mode. That at the moment, it's not really useful, because German aircraft isn't exactly something you see a lot of. I mean, there's German close air support, for example, but say the Oberkommando West really doesn't have a lot of air support at all. Which, as you might sort of realised, makes it not really much of an ability to use. Quickly, John, cover the skies. Against what? Our aircraft? Oh, yes. beyond that, I mean, you know, and they aren't realistically modelling after that, despite American aircraft tendency for friendly fire. But again, overall, powerful. Not something you want to fall into your hands, opponent's hands. You can also basically deal with pretty much all light vehicles. Even lighter tanks have to fear it. Now again, note with the Puma, you want to engage it from safest range, in which case you will lose. On the other hand, if you do want to try and take on a Puma with this one, you do have to be a bit clear about it. You have to lure it in within the range, and again, always keep the rear towards it. And in particular, I mean, if you can sort of get close enough, the Puma will have very little chance of escaping you set up correctly, because this thing actually turns faster than the Puma's turrets. So even the Puma tries to flank, it will actually take a lot of damage. Again, the rapid fire really will tear through it. But again, 222s, 251s, all that kind of thing will have heavy problems over this. Of course, regular armor will not. Although, if you can get some shots off of the Jet Panzer's rear armor with this one, you can actually do a bit of damage as well. Not something you'd usually consider, but it is true nonetheless. But it's very much sort of an expensive early game weapon to sort of dominate an area. And in that regard, you know, you have to be very careful, because if you end up losing it, you'll give your opponent a huge hand, because again, that is still 60 fuel as a nothing. Against go for a German opponent, you want to sort of knock it out as quickly as possible. Though you want to ensure you don't get reckless. And then again, anti-tank guns are away. If you're the Wehrmacht, I mean, if you really want to try 222, for example, you have to use the 222 for this. I mean, you can try and sort of, again, try and sort of hit it from the front and sort of stay in the front, but it's going to be a bit of a particular thing, and I'd certainly recommend 2 at the very least. So there's a little thing there to keep in mind. But again, a very low health, so if you can catch it with, say, an anti-tank gun, it won't take a lot of hits before this thing is burning. And again, that's again one of the major weaknesses. It is very fragile, but again, it has a high damage output. So if you can sort of keep those things in mind while using the M15, I mean, you'll generally find yourself having a lot of fun and overall dominating situations and overall sort of quickly turning things around. Now again, you also have to be aware of the weaknesses and ensure you don't get it lost, because again, if you lose it too quickly again, you will hand your opponent a bit of a card, because again, it is very expensive for such an early unit. And thus, it's not something you can sort of easily afford to lose. And even then, for example, and that's also something to keep in mind as a German opponent, if you do see, of course, you want to sort of ensure you don't get it, you know, into the wrong spots. They can sort of really lock you down, but at the same time, you will, of course, have a small chance to sort of figure, maybe I could take a head or something to try and hit it that way, because again, it does cost a lot of fuel, and it will set an American player a bit back. So again, that is very important to keep in mind as well. But I think that sort of largely covers the M15 E1 anti-aircraft half-track, a rather nasty piece of work here at the moment in the game. And again, can be very dominating under the right circumstances if you understand how to use it, though of course if you don't, it'll just be another piece of scrap. So, this is Imperial Dean saying thanks for watching. Hope you learned something. If you did, feel free to subscribe, share it with your friends. If not, you know, feel free to sort of suggest something you might want to see, and I'll see if I can't find something on replay to sort of cover that. But anyways, thank you all for watching, and cheers.